Hi there, welcome to Hevo. In this video, we'll understand what Pagination is and how to configure it for your REST API source. Before we begin, ensure that you are on the REST API source configuration page in Hevo and have configured any earlier steps based on your source API's requirements. When Hevo calls the source API, the response may contain hundreds or even thousands of records. However, most APIs do not return all records in a single response. Instead, they split the data into smaller chunks called pages. To fetch all records, Hevo must move from one page to the next. This process is called pagination. On the source configuration page, navigate to the pagination section. Hevo supports 4 pagination methods. No pagination, session-based, page number-based, offset and limit-based. Let's look at each of these. No pagination, this is the default option. With no pagination, Hevo makes a single API call and attempts to fetch the entire result set at once. Use this option only if your API returns all records in one response. For example, if an API that contains 3,000 records but returns only 1,000 records per request. If you select no pagination, Hevo will fetch the same 1,000 records every time. The remaining 2,000 records will never be retrieved. So if your API divides data into pages, you must select the appropriate pagination method based on your source API specifications. Session-based pagination. In some APIs, the response includes a value that indicates you how to fetch the next page. This value might represent where the next page begins, such as an ID, a reference value, or a URL to the next page. Hevo reads this value from the response and uses it in the next API request. To configure this, specify the following. Session query param, the name of the parameter that Hevo should send in the next request. Session response field, the JSON path expression that tells Hevo where to find the next page value in the response. If the API directly returns a full URL for the next page, enable the option to extract the URL from the response. Then, provide the JSON path that points to where that URL appears. If the next page value is stored inside the last record of the response, enable the option to extract it. Then specify the parameter name and the corresponding JSON path expression for that field. Hevo continues fetching pages until the API stops returning the next page value. Page number-based pagination. Some APIs organize data into numbered pages, where each request specifies a page number such as 1, 2, 3, and so on. To configure this, specify the following. Page number query param, the parameter name for the page number. Initial page number, the page where Hevo should begin fetching data from. This is usually 1. You can also configure Hevo to automatically extract the next page number from the response. To do this, provide a JSON path expression that identifies where the page number appears in the API response. You can also enable the increment for next page toggle to automatically increase this number with every request. Hevo continues requesting pages until the API stops returning results. Offset and limit-based pagination. This method retrieves data by specifying where to start fetching data and how many records to return. Think of it like this. Offset tells the API how many records to skip. Limit tells the API how many records to return. For example, if offset is 0 and limit is 100, the API returns the first 100 records. On the next call, since 100 records were fetched, the offset becomes 100. The API skips the first 100 records and returns the next 100, and the offset becomes 200, and the process continues. To configure this, specify the following. Offset query param, the parameter that controls how many records are skipped. Offset starting value, the first offset before data retrieval begins. This is usually 0. Offset increment value, how much the offset increases after each request. Limit query param, the parameter that controls how many records are returned. Limit initial value, the number of records returned per request. Hevo keeps increasing the offset in fetching batches until the API returns 0 records. Finally, test your pagination setup to make sure everything works as expected. If you configure any method other than no pagination, click Test Pagination. Hevo shows the responses page by page, allowing you to verify that records are being retrieved correctly. Once everything looks correct, click Finish Setup. To learn more or explore other features in Hevo, visit docs.hevodata.com. Thanks for watching.